Hey guys, what's going on? Bobby here, and welcome back to hopefully the conclusion of our kart rebuild series. If you go back to episode 1, we were like, hey, we're gonna get this go-kart ready for the season, blah blah blah. It's July. So yeah, I haven't been very timely with it. The plan is actually, and I'll announce it on the vlog, is we want to get this kart ready for the Ignite Challenge series to compete and contend for the rest of the season. So July 14th through the 15th, we'll be in Del Mar, Iowa at 61 Kartways, and we're gonna get this thing ready to compete for that race. So we are actually on the final chapter of getting this kart put back together. And if we actually walk over here, cameraman, you can take a look. This is something that, you know, you can do probably in a little bit more cleaner fashion, but these little pieces of paper are the individual things that we have to take care of, and I've actually put them in sequence. So this first part, we're going to reassemble the brake system, which, as we discussed in the previous episodes, we had a really bad brake system. We had a leak actually in the caliper, and we actually had comments going back and forth that we thought we pushed the pad out too far when we had it taken apart, and that wasn't the case. It was actually leaking from back here in this fitting. So I'm still happy with the decision. We're going to completely replace the assembly, and that's going to be easy to take care of. Second thing we're going to do, we're going to put the motor back on. We've got an Odenthal mount. We've got the motor that we ran for the first Ignite Challenge Series race at the Gateway Kartplex. We'll get that thrown on the chassis. Step 3 will be installing the seat to the chassis. We already have a seat ready to go. It's the seat that I ran last year in the Global Force Kart Sport Blue Angel number 51 for the Super Comp. That guy up there with the white bodywork, as you guys should remember. So the install will be really easily done for that. We'll just have to put the spacers in, bolt it all together, it'll be good to go. The big part, I think, is gonna be this guy right here, the axle installation. I think that's what a lot of you guys are gonna be able to take a lot of information from, because it's, as a new person, it's very daunting. There's a lot of pieces there that you gotta put back together. And unfortunately, I've put more axles together this year than I think I have all my other years prior. So we should be able to nail that out pretty quick as well. And then to end it out, just a lot of the minor cosmetic stuff. We'll have to route the fuel line, install the fuel tank, and then end with body work and all the cosmetics, polish it up real good at the very end, and we'll be ready to hit the track mid-July at 61 Kartways. So without further ado, backtracking my steps, let's get this brake assembly on the kart. So like I said, we're going to start with the brake system here. It's really simple. There's a bracket here that's mounted onto the chassis, welded in. There's 2 big bolts that we're going to throw in right there. The caliper is going to go fit perfectly right there. And then same thing here. We got a bracket that's attached to the chassis, 2 holes here where the pedal is going to be installed right here. I guess you'd call that the master cylinder. We're going to run the 2 bolts through there, and then we've actually got a pin that we'll put in this top hole that'll go right here to reconnect the brake pedal. So 5 easy bolts. So the big thing is that when you both for the caliper and the master cylinder, then you're going to actually have to use these safety clips right here. I'll put them in my palm so the camera guy can focus in on them. The big clip will be used for the caliper, the 2 bolts in the caliper, so you need 2 of the big clips, and then 3 of the smaller ones. We're going to use 2 for the 2 bolts on the master cylinder, and we also got to use 1 of those for that one that goes to the pedal. This is the only new thing you need. I'm reusing the same bolt and the same nut, same washers that we used when we took it apart. I feel like a burp's coming on again, but I can't do it because I'm on camera. All right, next up on our list is the motor mount. And what we're actually going to do, in the way that you have to follow the process, is step 1, we're going to put the motor mount on the chassis. What comes stock nowadays with the Margay Ignite is this beautiful Odenthal angled motor mount. So we will get this mounted to the chassis. That'll be step 1. Step 2 will be to prepare these motor studs that go on the top of the plate. We'll have to actually screw those on, make sure they're tight. We will use blue Loctite to make sure that the studs are in place. We will not use blue Loctite for the actual nuts that sandwich to the top of the motor onto the plate. Once we have all that put together, then the motor will be good to go, and we'll be able to continue on. We have the studs mounted the way that we do for two reasons. One, we have a reference cart over here, Mazagaitis's. And
whoa!
When Margay put that together, they had his studs in this position. But as you see, you've got multiple options of where you can put these studs into the motor mount. So
and why is that important, Bobby Krug?
So the big thing is you obviously don't want to mount the motor too close to the seat, so you have to watch your clearance there. But I like to get it as inboard as possible for weight balance. If you have it so far out wide, then it's not centralizing the weight. And when we talk about, you know, more setup-y stuff, like I said, that's a little advanced for the rebuild. But, you know, first place we usually throw lead is up front on the go-kart, on the bar up here by where the serial number is, to try to counterbalance all the weight towards the back of the cart. Then we start throwing it like on the side of the seat to counterbalance the motor. So the more inboard we can get this, the more neutral and balanced the weight is distributed throughout the chassis. So we're trying to get it as far in as possible, and that's why we have mounted it, or why we plan to mount it in those positions. Now that we've got the motor mount mounted to the chassis, now it's time to mount the motor to the motor mount that has already been mounted to the chassis. Do it for Dale.
Oh my God.
Dale.
Praise hell, praise
Dale.
Dale.
Dale Jr.
Oh my goodness.
Still, there is a cash reward to anybody that can find Dale. I guess we have to start calling him Dale Sr. because we got Dale Jr. here. You can find Dale Sr. Any information leading to the recovery of Dale Sr.
Hey Bobby, should I put washers in between the nut and the engine case?
No, and I don't know why, but I wouldn't do it. It doesn't come with it. Full throttle, that's what we want. That's a happy engine. Full throttle, little clickety clickety click. That's what you want to be hearing. That's how you know that you have properly installed your carburetor slide, throttle cable through to the carburetor when you're hearing the little clickety click. That made such a cute little whoosh. Now that we got this motor mounted to the chassis, we're ready for step number 3 in the reassemble process. And now we're gonna start dealing with the El Ejectocito, cuz. We're gonna start by putting the seat struts on the cart loosely, so that way we can kind of position where these need to be. We'll start bringing the seat in. We'll be able to bolt the seat into the 2 front tabs, so that way we're happy with it is on how it's mounted up front, rather. And then we'll make the minor adjustments with the seat struts, and then we'll crank it all down. It's very much on all of these bolts and nuts to get things snug. If you over tighten one of the ones, especially the ones that mount from the seat struts or these tabs down here to the seat, and you go too tight, you're gonna crack the seat. So we want it to be tight because it's very important that the seat's tight and being able to transfer the load and the energy throughout the cart. But if we over tighten it and break the seat, that's expensive. And in my mom's car, broom broom. Seat, check. Brakes, check. Motor, check. Next step in our rebuild process here is installing the axle. So this is probably going to be the most extensive process of our entire rebuild right now. A couple things you're going to want to take note of is that the end of this axle here with the 3 key slots is the side that goes towards the motor. This one, it goes unused. We'll use this for our hub. This is used for our sprocket, our rear gear. And then on this left side, we'll have the brakes mounted on this keyway, and then this final one on the far left, as you might guess, goes for the left side hub. The other thing too is that you have to keep note of is if you go the route of purchasing new bearings, they have these little caps in them. You should be able to see it right there. Pretty sure that's a little actual like a grease trap, this little nub right here. So the first thing that we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to take a pair of vice grips or pliers and pull those out so they can sit flushly into our bearing cassettes. If you replace bearings, you should replace bearing cassettes. These are usually replaced as a pair. So with everything else on this cart rebuild, we're gonna go step by step. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our bearings, our cassettes, put them together. Then we will hang them on the chassis here at the bearing hanger. And then the next step will be to slide the axle in and then start putting the components on as we go. But like I said, first step, getting the bearings put together. On our bearing cassettes, there's actually a slit here that you can see that allows the bearings to slide in. So you actually slot them in kind of perpendicular to the cassette, like so. And now it slides in. Now you can flip it to the direction that you need, and bada boom, you've got your cassette and your bearings have been properly mated. Now if you come over here to the cart real quick, let me show you how you have to position these. So you need to have the bolt facing this direction with the set screws on the inside when it is placed here on this side.
Show me set screws.
So the set screws
are
right there. Boom. They're on the inside of the chassis, and the 3/16 bolt is facing that way. On this other side, what we're going to have is we're going to have the 3/16 bolt facing out like this with our set screws on the inside as well. So 3/16 bolts facing the back, set screws are on the inside. All right, we're ready to put the axle in. We have to go in from the motor side because we need to be able to get the axle key in for the brake rotor. If we went the other direction, we would have to go further and then slide it back in. So we're gonna have our brake rotor handy. We're also gonna have our sprocket assembly ready to go as well. And then additionally, I already have axle keys ready to go. We are not gonna worry about the hubs quite yet. With a little bit of our friend WD-40, I like to spray a little bit on the inside of the bearings. And I also like to spray a little bit on the axle as well. Now that both parties are lubed up, it's time for some action.
Looks like it's going.
Now that we got the axle halfway through, this is the spot that's extremely important. So we can start sliding in our components that live in this center part of the chassis. We will start with our sprocket gear. So that will just slide on through. And we can leave this loose for now, but since this is a pretty easy piece to slide around, we don't have to necessarily worry about that placement quite yet. Also, we've got a new chain here. We're gonna throw the chain in as well. Otherwise, we would have to use a chain breaker, and that's a lot of extra work that we don't wanna have to do. If we can just slide the chain right back on, call it good, and then we don't have to worry about it. The last piece that we have to pay attention to now is the brake rotor. Now, what we have to do with this, and this is where this placement becomes very particular, we have to put it into the caliper while also feeding it through the axle assembly. And then we have to pair it along with the next bearing that we have to get through. So those are the three main steps. You know, you want to feed it through, make sure it's in the caliper, feed the axle through, and then get it to start lining up with the bearing. Then we can start hammering it back through. As this keyway, these keyholes right about here, as we continue to hit it, as this line of 3 holes there, as that starts working its way down to the brake rotor, then we're gonna have to be a little bit more cautious about the placement of the brake rotor, because our plan is as we get close, we're gonna put this key on like so. We'll hammer it through the keyway here, and then we'll be pretty good to go. And then the next thing will be to make sure that we have the axle aligned perfectly centered into our bearings. So for example, right now we're at about, we'll call that 8 3/4, a little bit under that. And then we go to this side and it's gonna be a lot less than that. We're about just over 7 inches. So now what we gotta do is we're gonna play a game of Pong where we're gonna go back and forth, and we need the same measurement on both sides. That way that'll tell us that we are absolutely centered to the chassis. So it's gonna take us a couple tries, it usually does. But once we got it centered, then the next step is gonna be we're gonna take blue Loctite to our new set screws for the bearings, and that's what's gonna be the little guys that hold this axle into the bearings. So we'll get the axle centered, put the set screws in, and then we'll start tightening down the other accessories to our axle. 7 3/4 on the line. We've done it. How many tries does that take, Matsigitis? 13?
Yes.
We got it good. Time to put some set screws in. We'll use a light amount of blue Loctite. Don't overdo the blue Loctite. You'll never get the axle out. So we'll use a little bit of blue Loctite for the 3 set screws on each side, 6 in total. Then we'll start worrying about the brake rotor and the sprocket. The big thing with aligning this brake rotor in the rear is, it's as obvious as it may seem, is you want to make sure that that rotor is centered to the best of your ability in between the 2 brake pads. So right now as this sits, we've got it pretty centered right there. The way that we're going to center up this sprocket gear on the back is we'll get the chain started on the driver on the clutch, and then we will pretty much move it back and forth until we feel like it looks pretty straight. There are tools out there, alignment tools that you can use for the chain. If you've got that at your disposal, feel free to use it. I've done pretty good at having good luck aligning it by eye, so that's what we're going to do. Then only thing we gotta do for the brake rotor in the back here is tighten up these 4 bolts that hold this hub to the rotor, and then we have the main bolt that clamps it down to the axle. The only one we got to worry about though for the sprocket is the one that holds it onto the axle, and then we will be good to move on to putting on the hubs. What we need to do now is one thing that I hadn't mentioned before that we'll have to do is we'll have to take our 3/16 T-handle, and right here, this little bolt that holds the bearing into the cassette, we will have to tighten these guys up. There's one here, and then there's one on the other side right here. We do want to tighten those 2 bolts until, like I said, it is tight, but not reducing the amount of rotation that we're getting out of the axle. Next step, final step for the axle, is putting these hubs back on. A good rule of thumb, first off, not a rule of thumb, but thing we don't want to miss out on is you need to make sure we put the keys on. And that, my friends, is a completed axle assembly. Last steps are a little bit of cosmetic stuff, and I'll walk through it real quick. We will eventually need to put a micron on. We're not going to deal with that today though. Body work, front panel, front bumper, side pods, rear bumper. Last thing besides that will be the install of the fuel tank and the fuel line. Like I said, we're on the home stretch. You may be asking yourself, Bobby, why are you chewing on the fuel line? Before you comment, the reason I'm doing that, the trade secret, is it actually kind of helps soften it up a little bit. So I don't know what weird old go-kart guy taught me that. Probably Keith Scharf. That's exactly why I'm doing that. I just need to take a little bit of the nib off.
No.
You don't remember nibs?
Nope.
The little chocolate covered ice cream nugget things? They had it like crunch flavored and like mint chocolate chip.
Is this like Mount Olive Tasty Freeze or something?
Dude, you've never heard of nibs?
No.
You are kidding me.
Wow, no.
Are you serious?
I promise.
Time out.
Oh Lord.
What? Nibs?
What are those?
Nibs ice cream. Or dibs.
Oh yeah, dibs. I've heard of dibs. Stupid.
Yeah, dibs. That's what I was thinking of, dibs. Not nibs.
Yeah.
just like that, this once was Brendan Lauer's go-kart. Don't look like it no more. Man, does this thing, I'm really happy with how it turned out. The graphics kit really helps this thing shine through. We found a lot of issues with this thing early on. We got a lot of things fixed up. Next time it's hitting the track with it and seeing what it's actually capable of. We know the chassis is good, we know the driver's good, motor's good, we ran this before. So really excited to hit the track with this kart in the Ignite Challenge series this year. So without further ado, to kind of close it out like I hinted to earlier, if there's a part of the rebuild or anything karting related that you guys would like to see in a future garage episode, please let us know down in the comments below. We would be happy to come back and touch up on things that we might have missed. So with that, both these karts looking sharp as could be, and we're ready to hit the track for the Ignite Challenge series. I want to thank you guys for tuning into the rebuild series. Hopefully you guys were able to learn something, or be able to help you with your own rebuilds in the future. So looking forward to hitting the track here in a short couple weeks with these karts, and hopefully bringing back some hardware from Iowa, and then on to Springfield and Autobahn and all the other fun tracks that we got on the schedule. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you at the track.